A lot of time in 1827, 1828, 1829. Next week we'll actually start off in 600 BC. And we will spend some time there because I think it's important as we look at the Book of Mormon and who wrote it and why they were writing it, that we understand well if we understand 1827, 1828, 1829, we should be able to look at this and go, this is an absolute miracle. This is one of those things. It's like BYU shouldn't win 2 weeks in a row, and they haven't to do that. The Book of Mormon shouldn't exist given the environment in which it came from. Now, in my mind, why is that? It's faith promoting for us. But on top of that, if this is a unique moment, and that is that there is more people having questions and doubts and struggles about the church, what responsibility is laid specifically on this class, on you? What responsibility do we have? Any idea? Fire away. Yeah, you. Think about it. What responsibilities do we have as a class? If you're going to get an hour and a half, and we're going to have a chance to go as slowly as we want, and you're going to have some understandings about the Book of Mormon and Joseph Smith, what responsibilities do we have to those around us? Share. Yes, absolutely. You have a unique ability, I think, to be able to explain some things, because we have in the past tended to kind of do this and go, well, you know, I have a testimony, I don't question anything, I don't have any doubts, church is true. We are surrounded, and that may be true, but we are surrounded by people who are questioning and doubting and hearing stuff online and from friends and in high schools and everywhere they turn. And you're going to have answers. And so now you cannot be able to say, well, just pray more and read more and you'll get the answers. You have to have answers. And those answers may do a long way towards keeping people understanding what our true doctrines are. Yeah.
I think we also have a responsibility to treat those people with compassion and not disregard them or belittle their testimonies.
Hang on to that quote, because we're going to Elder Ballard gave an incredible talk to the Utah South area yesterday. And Deseret News is reporting it, and the numerous people is reporting some of the things that he said. And I have some of those comments, and it's going to be right with exactly what you're saying. Okay? All right. That's it. Let me start with a quote by Brother Daniel Peterson. Today, Mormonism and Western society seems to be parting ways in crucial respects. They're no longer aligned. In an era where such things aren't appreciated, Mormonism seems socially retrograde and corporate to many outside observers. Mormonism's patriarchal orientation, men focus, for example, to put it mildly, out of focus in fashionable circles. Its emphasis on heterosexual marriage is often seen as hateful. Its insistence on fidelity within marriage as somewhat quaint, and its requirement of chastity outside of marriage as transparently ridiculous. Don't we just look silly out there? You guys still believe that stuff. Come on. Young minds are particularly sensitive to peer pressure and fashions, and consequently it's unsurprising that the relatively sudden collapse of external social support for core Mormon values seems disproportionately to affect the younger generation. What he's saying is, if we go back to the 50s, Mormons were still seen as kind of quaint and a little strange. But the fact that we believed in traditional marriage and all those kind of things was still really, it fit with mainstream values. You may think the Gold Bible is kind of strange, but everything about Mormons and traditional family and all that made sense. Now suddenly we're still espousing the same values, and the world has gone, heading another direction, and we're the ones that look increasingly out of step. Okay? And he says it disproportionately affects younger generation. That generation is exceptionally wired and has therefore been hit with an onslaught of attacks based on Mormon history, for which traditional church instruction has left them woefully unprepared. Let me say that one again. Those of you who have youth, teach youth, have youth in your ward, have grandkids, has been hit with an onslaught of attacks based on Mormon history, for which traditional church instruction has left them woefully unprepared. Back to Michael Otterson's comments about the church is a big ship and it takes a little while. Have you ever been on a cruise ship and you see how long it takes for the thing to dock as it's slowly moving? It's such a big ship and it just takes a while. And you're watching the church make some changes here and to be able to recognize things like this. I'm convinced that those attacks can be met, but the fact remains, because of the details of its history aren't safely lost in the distant biblical past, Mormonism is more open to such attacks in a very real sense than they are much older religious traditions. In other words, it's one thing to be attacking Moses or Elijah, but it's another thing when we've got Brigham Young's journals. It's another thing when we have our recent history and it's easy to go access this stuff. Okay? So, that's why we're going to take just a little bit today and spend some time in 1827, 1828, 1829. Now, the other thing is that part of why I want to spend some time here too is new information just over the summer has become available on the translation process. Those in the church that worked so hard on the Joseph Smith papers, this idea of church transparency. We want online, outside of the temple documents, we want online everything that Joseph Smith ever wrote, everything that he ever said, everything that is recorded. We're going to put all this out there, and not just put it out there where you have to go to the BYU library to get it. We want it online so anybody can access it, Mormon or not, and get to it and cross-reference it and study it. And they're just, as quickly as possible, it's going to be out there. So we're getting a chance to see Joseph in all of his roughness and all of his warts. And I think one of the things that you're going to see with him is, oh my gosh, the Book of Mormon is a miracle. Coming from this guy who is more backwoodsy than you might think. Because we grew up, those of us who have been in the church for a while, go to the church library and get all of the pictures of Joseph Smith translating. And what do you see? A dude in a tie, very nicely looking at the plates, and he's looking, and he's looking at the characters, and he's carefully writing them down. Yes, and we would almost expect him to then turn around as people come in and say, "You're Joseph Smith," and he might turn around and say, "Behold, a marvelous work is about to come forth among the children of men. Therefore, O ye that embark in the service of God." It's like, it's almost like the Bible scriptures that or the Bible movies that we get about Jesus, and every word that he comes out of his mouth is just pure scripture. Well, we sometimes have that vision of Joseph Smith, and you're about to see how rough he really was. And so, we had a chance with the Downs and us. We had a chance to be in Palmyra this last summer, and so I wanted to kind of give you. This is actually kind of the rebuilt Smith cabin, looking out the back door, and the sacred grove is right. You're looking out at the sacred grove. Okay, so in my mind, I could picture while I was standing there. This is similar to what Joseph Smith would have looked like on that morning as he walks out of the house, and he walked across that field over there. Just to the side of that is where the apple orchard was, where he saw Moroni again. But this is him going out there, and then you get this picture of the Smith farm sitting out there. And so here are these guys in kind of this indigent circumstances, and this very young boy. Now, just kind of the overview. The Hill Cumorah is in the foreground, that number 1. thing. You can kind of see where the side of the hill is cleared away on the side of the hill Cumorah so they can do the pageant right there. And I don't know if you can see very well. It's like the red dot. I wish I had a pointer. It's the red dot, the second one down, in the middle is where the sacred grove is. So you get a sense where the Smith farm was, and then Joseph making his way through the forest over to the hill Cumorah. So kind of put that in your head a little bit. Okay? And so so it's amazing that the Lord knew what He was doing to take this family that was living in Vermont and New Hampshire and move the family and have them rent out a farm and have it be about 1.5 miles away from where the plates were waiting for Joseph to be discovered, but sat there for years until it was time for Joseph to be able. Because remember, he's only 8 or 9 when they moved to Palmyra. Okay. Now, also the timing of this is nice because here comes in our October ensign. On October 1831, Joseph Smith attended a conference in Orange, Ohio. During the conference, his brother Hiram said he thought best the information of the coming forth of the Book of Mormon might be related by Joseph himself to the elders present, that they might know for themselves. According to the minutes of the meeting, Joseph said that it was not intended to tell the world all the particulars of the coming forth of the Book of Mormon, and that it was not expedient for him to relate those things. Now, wouldn't that be nice if we're trying to explain to people in a lot greater detail how the Book of Mormon came? Wouldn't that be helpful? I was just reading something again this morning. It is such a tragedy that we don't have the plate, so everybody would know.
Then they wouldn't go off faith either.
Then we'd remove the faith element of that. Having matured in his role as and this matured thing, let's talk about that for a second. Having matured in his role as a seer and coming to believe that seer stones were not essential to revelation. Wow. Let's say that one again. Having matured in his role as a seer, coming to believe that seer stones were not essential to revelation, perhaps he worried that people might focus too much on how the book came forth and too little on the book itself. So, one of those little startling things that came this summer is that the church is publishing pictures of Joseph Searstone.
It's just a rock.
It's just a rock. Yeah, it is. I'll show you a picture of it in a second. Now, again, we have a very rough-hewn kid. And the question is how you take this guy with all of the pre-existent ordinations and preparations to be the magnificent prophet that he became. And how do you take this kid and slowly grow him into prophetness? Now, that's kind of going to be an important question here, because one of the struggles that sometimes people have with church history is, what do prophets do? What do prophets know? How much do they know? And when did they know it? For those of you who have been in the church for a little while, anybody remember Mark Hoffman?
Yes.
Remember the times when Mark Hoffman was making lots of money, those of you who don't know, doing forgeries. And he got really good at writing all kinds of forgeries. This is in the mid-'80s. And suddenly all this informational stuff about documents and things was coming to light. And the church was getting all these letters and this and that and everything. And it was just Hoffman forging it. And he knew how to make the papers look old and the writing look real close and stuff like that. And we had this picture in the church news. Here's President Hinckley accepting these documents from Mark Harmon, NCIS.
Yes.
Oh, they're good.
You don't watch.
Wrong one, yeah. From Hoffman. And there they are. And everybody, and when it turned out that the guy was actually a murderer and he's now in prison, there were the questions coming back and saying, wasn't President Hinckley a prophet? Shouldn't he have known this guy was a forger? Shouldn't he known?
would have been nice.
It would have been nice for him to go, thank you for the Wait a minute. You're a forger and a murderer in your heart. Therefore, I will not receive these things. But he didn't do that. In fact, it was trumpeted that we now had all these new documents. And not only that, Hoffman went on a particular little roll for saying at the moment that Joseph Smith went to get the plates out of the ground, he was stopped by a lizard. The salamanders. And everybody went, wow, it was salamanders? That's kind of strange. We thought it was Angel Moroni. Well, Angel Moroni took the form of a salamander. And the church, and for about a year and a half, the church was like, a salamander?
Hang on a minute.
Well, shouldn't prophets have known that?
Catch on eventually.
Part of what we're discovering about prophets is how much they go by faith in their own revelation themselves. And we're certainly about to find that with Joseph Smith.
But they they didn't accept the salamander idea.
Well, I
They
remember
just
being
said
at BYU and watching scholars trying to research salamander stuff. And they're just like, where this thing came out of left field. And so they were doing massive searches on all the times in salamander. And it wasn't making any sense. But it's like, here we have this document from Joseph Smith saying it was a salamander that stopped him from getting the plates. And the church, I'm telling you, the BYU faculty was in a quandary for about 18 months going, oh, we got to study more on lizards because nothing makes sense.
They don't have teeth.
Yeah. So here's the training of a prophet. And basically, okay, let me do this. In the Book of Mormon, and we're going to find, and we will talk about this in the next few weeks. The Lord said, I will prepare unto my servant Geslam a stone, which shall shine forth in darkness unto light. A way of translating records. Now, the fascinating thing about this is the term Geslam. Here's my question. Are they referring to Joseph Smith or are they referring to the stone? Depends on how you read it, right? I'll prepare unto my servant Geslam a stone. Or I will prepare unto my servant Geslam a stone.
Name your pet rock.
Yeah. Yes. So is Geslam meaning the servant or is Geslam meaning the stone?
Wasn't that a code name to protect Joseph Smith and the other guys?
Good guess.
No. Okay.
You'd heard that one. The answer is yes. There's a dual meaning here. Geslam is the stone, it's the seer stone. Wilford Woodruff also said Joseph Smith was also the Geslam, the seer. In a sense, he was the seer stone. And Wilford Woodruff took it to the point of saying, and I don't know whether he got it from Joseph Smith or of his own opinion, he said this was Joseph's name in the pre-existence. How about that? Do we know that? No, we don't. Just a quote by Wilford Woodruff, who, by the way, was incredibly taken by this seer stone. And specifically, it was talking about a seer stone. What year was the first vision? 1820. What year did Joseph first meet Moroni? 1823, 3 years later. He will then get the full Book of Mormon 1827. 1820, 2 years later, a year before he will meet Moroni, Joseph is digging a well for somebody, and about 30 feet down, he will come upon a stone. That stone, in all likelihood. And that he realized that was a seer stone, which meaning for him, he could look into the stone. If he would darken the room around him, he could look into this stone and he could find lost things. People would lose stuff, and Joseph began to look into this stone and he could tell them where it was. and he began to have quite a reputation that he could that Joseph Smith had a stone that he could look into and find stuff. That was his reputation in the area. This is a year before Moroni. Can you see the training of a prophet? Teaching him to be able to look into things. Yeah?
Sorry, so he was about 17. How did he know that was a seer stone?
Good question. Don't know. Well, we don't know, but we do know that the man that was digging with him, a man by the name of Chase, always argued that it was really his stone and Joseph stole it. But Joseph got very good at looking in this, and again, there was just a reputation. Now, it's funny, when you go to Palmyra, how many have been to Palmyra? Ain't a great big place, is it? It still has never really taken off. In small town Palmyra, there was actually two groups of thought here. On one side, there were those that were convinced that there was Spanish gold and Indian gold and stuff to be found, and so there were a number of people out looking for treasure in a new developing land where people are really, really poor. The idea of finding hidden gold and silver and treasure was pretty appealing. On the other side of this was upper crust society, who looked way down their nose at people would look for treasure. And so they really disliked this lower class treasure hunter people. So when you've got this young man and they're building this little farm outside, just over the line in Manchester, this Smith kid who's seeing things in a peak stone, most of upper society said, no, it's the Smiths. And the lower class people said, man, he's really good at this. And I was looking at a document last night on the Joseph Smith papers where Josiah Stoll is putting together the contract of 11 men that are on this treasure hunting committee. There are 11 men, and it says, and Joseph Smith Sr. and Joseph Smith Jr. get 2/11 of any treasure that we find. And we have the signed document from Josiah Stoll. And by the way, we talked about that previously. That was part of the problem when Joseph found the plates, that there were other 9 guys out there who thought that they were owed a 9/11 of the gold plates because Joseph was part of their treasure hunting team. That's why they're going to become so vociferous in just a minute here as we talk about this. Okay, but I need you to see that in 1820, the Lord is already preparing this. Now, Brigham Young and Wilford Woodruff and others believe that this finding of this seer stone was that it was a seer stone, that in some way Joseph was able to interact with that it was the Lord led him to find that stone about 30 feet down. This particular stone went from Joseph to Oliver Cowdery. Oliver Cowdery kept it in his possession till he died. Oliver Cowdery's wife gave it to Phineas Young. Phineas Young, Brigham Young's brother, gave it to Brigham. When Brigham died, it was given to one of his wives. She held on to it for a while, and then near her death, she donated it to the church. And the brethren have indicated, yes, we've had this particular seer stone in our possession. Pretty unbroken evidence chain that this is Joseph's stone from 1822. Before he has a Urim and Thummim, the interpreters. How about that? Okay. Now, again, you look at it, it's a rock. So the translation process, as we'll talk about, has a way of focusing this. The other part, of course, is this is a depiction of Joseph with the breastplate, and then the Nephite interpreters. Joseph didn't call them Urim and Thummim until much later. They were just known as the interpreters. And because of his peepstone, seer stone experience, when he first gets the plates are kind of cool. But the interpreters, he says to his mom, are marvelous. The things you can see in this. And so the night that he will deposit the plates from Cumorah, he will actually take these Nephite interpreters, a bow with kind of egg-shaped stones in them. And when we get to the Book of Mormon, we'll really talk basically where he got them from, the Jaredite. He wraps them in a handkerchief, and when he gets back to the Smith house, and his mom is there as they come in that morning, he says, "These are incredible." And he hands her, wrapped in a handkerchief, the interpreters. And Mama Smith is able to, she can feel them through the handkerchief, and they're there, they're physical. She can hold them. Okay? Let's see. A meeting in 1874. Parley P. Pratt told his audience about being present many times when Joseph Smith was translating the New Testament. Seeing no interpretive instruments in use during the translation process, he wondered why Joseph did not use the Urim and Thummim, as in translating the Book of Mormon. As Elder Pratt watched the prophet translate, Joseph, as if he read his thoughts, looked up and explained that the Lord gave him the Urim and Thummim when he was inexperienced in the spirit of inspiration. But now he had advanced so far that he understood the operations of the Spirit, and he did not need the assistance of that instrument. In essence, the seer stone and the interpreters were training wheels. Until the prophet himself could fully realize the power of a seer, and that he didn't need that. In fact, I was reading an interesting thing last night. They have found, this is one of those little discoveries they found, in going through the original manuscript that we have now of Joseph Smith, of the Book of Mormon, and you've got Oliver Cowdery's wonderful handwriting. And going through the entire thing, Dr. Royal Skousen at BYU was going through this, and he found 28, in his text of the original manuscript, he found 28 words in a different handwriting. And he looked carefully and did some comparing and realized that it was Joseph Smith's handwriting. It's the only place we have in the entire manuscript where we have Joseph Smith's writing the interpretation of the Book of Mormon. It's 2 lines in Allen. And the thought was, how come in the middle of Oliver Cowdery's transcribing what Joseph is telling him, we get 28 words from Joseph Smith? Well, the mystery was solved when they went back about 4 lines, and in Oliver Cowdery's handwriting, he's going to, and the Lamanites were descend.
Oh, he fell asleep.
And it just tails off. What happened?
I think he fell
He went to
asleep.
sleep. Oliver went to sleep. And they would translate about 6 hours a day. And imagine sitting and writing with an ink thing 6 hours a day. Oliver's brain got tired and he went to sleep. So why didn't they just stop? Well, one of the things that Emma and Oliver and others have told us, we have 3 different witnesses that tell us this. Part of the translation process is that as Joseph would take either the interpreters or the seer stone, and he would put it in the hat to close out the ambient light so that he could look in and see it. And by the way, he never used the plates. The plates just sat there with a sheet on them, or a handkerchief. He's looking in here, and the seer stone would be there, and he would see about 30 words at a time. And so he'd be repeating those 30 words. And then when they would come to something like, I don't know how to spell this, I'm a pretty uneducated guy, so thus saith Nephi. Nephi? Something. Or this is Zoram. He'd just spell out the names of these people. Okay? And then it would stay there until Oliver would say, got it, finished, and then it would go away, and here comes the next set. Okay? Well, the belief is Oliver's working along, goes to sleep, and Joseph's still got and the words are still on the stone. It's like, yeah, we need to go to the next slide, but it's not going away. So Joseph had to like take that moment to like finish it. So you got it. Okay, it's gone. Now we can take a nap. Okay. Now, again, so here's some of the information now that we have, and this is Joseph and Emma at the Hill Cumorah right shortly after midnight, September 22nd, 1827. You need to know there were two locals, Palmyra locals Samuel Lawrence and Willard Chase. Samuel Lawrence was part of his treasure hunting buddies. When Alvin dies, and Moroni is telling him, when you go to get the plates, don't go alone, take somebody with you. Joseph actually approached Samuel Lawrence to be the guy to go with him to the Hill Cumorah. So Samuel Lawrence for quite a while, and Samuel Lawrence was kind of involved in kind of being excited, we're going to finally get the gold plates. And obviously he was still thinking this is golden treasure. Then in January 1827, Joseph will add a new companion, that is Emma. He gets married. Now he knows in September he's going to take Emma to the Hill Cumorah, not Samuel Lawrence. So he breaks the news to Samuel Lawrence after waiting a year or so. No, I'm not taking you to the Hill Cumorah. Because guess what? All of the treasure hunters knew September 22nd he was going to go get the plates. It was fairly well known. Why? Also, because the other man, Willard Chase, was a carpenter. And Joseph kept saying to him, could you build me a chest about this big? For why? Well, because that's where I'm getting the plates, and I need to have a locked chest that I can put the plates in. And Chase said, you have no money. I'm not willing to do that. You're not good for it. And then right about a month before, Mother Smith is going to Willard Chase and saying, we need the chest. Can we work a deal with you where we're going to trade some foodstuffs and things and pay for the rest of the chest? And Willard Chase was willing to start working on the chest for the plates, except for the fact that they still hadn't paid for it yet. So Willard Chase was also very open and saying to everybody, you know what, it's almost September 22nd. Joseph is going to go get the plates. The community knew that this was the day. That's why they're going to go at midnight.
Where was the moon?
Good question. That'd be worth looking
Did they
up.
have light?
Yeah. Now, to give you an idea though, because, yeah.
I see Joseph as this innocent young man just sharing this information.
He just, yeah, what's
Just
the deal?
randomly, and didn't even think that somebody would start to, persecute and torture and all kinds of
Although, let me give you another side of Joseph. Here's the worry. The worry is this Lawrence guy knows, Chase knows, the community knows, and I'm worried that they're going to try and stop me when I go to get the plates. So on the night of, in the evening of September 21st, Joseph sends his dad, Joseph Smith Sr., to the Lawrence house to see if Lawrence is going to try and sneak down to the Hill Cumorah and get the plates. Stop him, okay? And here's the instructions he gives to Dad. Joseph directed his father to stay until dark. And if he saw any signs that Lawrence was going to the hill, you tell him I will find him and I will trash the stumps with him. How about that?
Don't know that expression, but it doesn't sound
Trash the stump sounds like... Yeah, in other words, if we're going to do it, again, you have a rough, kind of farm boy kind of guy, and he's basically telling his dad, if you tell him that if he goes anywhere near the Hill Cumorah, I'm going to beat him up bad. I will trash the stumps with him. Yeah.
Well, that really, it sets the scene for what it was like around there, what did they have to do to clear land?
Yeah. Oh, trash the stump, sure.
Yeah, so
And
they had to-
I won't use an axe. I'll use Lawrence. Don't think he can stop me from getting the plate. You know, you just kind of get this bravado of this young guy who just says, "I'll beat him." Tell him, "I'll beat him up."
He was tall.
Yeah, and I'm strong, and I've been, you know. So you get this sense of how rough he is. I just love this image of Joseph just said, and apparently then Dad waits outside of there's sign, okay, the lights are going out, they've gone to bed. He comes back and tells Joseph, no, he's not coming, he went to bed. Great. Now I'll go get Emma. By the way, I don't have a wagon. But Joseph Knight Sr. had also known that this was coming. So he comes all the way up, a guy that he'd worked for. So they want to, and Josiah Stoll. They're both there because it's September 21st. He's getting the plates tomorrow. It's a party. They're getting the plates tomorrow. They're all there. And so midnight, Joseph gets up. He's got to have a way to get him and Emma over to the Hill Cumorah. And Joseph Knight's horse is there. So they take Joseph Knight's horse, hook it to the wagon. And Joseph Knight will get up in the morning and go, my horse is missing. and Lucy will go, it's a big farm. It might be out here somewhere. You know, she saw Joseph leave.
Kill horse thief.
Yeah. And so then they're going to come back later. And again, Joseph has taken the plates. He cleared out part of an old stump because it is so well known that he's going to have the plates. He can't even bring it home. So he's going to clear out part of a stump, put inside the stump, put the moss and everything back over the top of it, and then come home. And the only thing he brings back really is the interpreters that Mother is able to see. Okay, now. Mrs. Wells in Mayston. So about the next day then, they actually get word that there's a woman in Mayston that was like 5 miles down the road from Palmyra, that she has a well that needs to be dug. So the word goes out and Joseph goes, I can go dig the well and I can come up with the rest of the money to give to Mr. Chase so that I can have a box to put the plates in. So Joseph goes off to Mayston to dig the well. But he takes the interpreters with him, right? Well, during that day, Father Smith becomes aware that Chase and Lawrence have hired a soothsayer. This is a diviner, somebody that is who is pretty evil, to try and get the treasure. And Father Smith gets pretty worried that, oh my gosh, they're going to come get us. And he runs home and he tells Emma. Emma then gets on a horse and she's going to ride from up to Palmyra over to Mayston to tell Joseph that this mob is kind of wanting to come and steal the plates. Yeah. But give you how this works. This was the ancient texting thing before we were able to text. Joseph is digging the well. He pulls out the interpreters. He looks in the interpreters and he can see Emma coming. That's how those work. You look, oh, Emma's on her way. So he puts them in, tells Mrs. Wells, I'll be back. I got to go for a while. He gets on his horse. He rides back and he meets Emma halfway. I know you're coming. Well, we're worried about the plates. Joseph goes, hold on. Plates are safe. He can see the plates in the stump and it's still undisturbed.
I think I read in the manual somewhere that he used it often. He got warnings about the place.
Yeah. He did. Yeah, that becomes fortuitous because then he's going to go the next night. He's going to get the plates out of the stump. He can do it late at night. He's carrying about 40 pounds of plates. And he's making his way down towards there. And a guy hits him with a gun. He's able to get past him. He gets past another guy. He punches him out, dislocates his thumb. Then he's able to get past one more guy. So he has 3 different attacks on his way, the 1.5 miles with the 40-pound plates. And he's going to come in the back side of the Smith house, and he bangs on the window, and Joseph Knight opens the window, and there's Joseph standing with a dislocated thumb. He's bleeding a bit, and he's carrying 40 pounds of something in a blanket. And he hands the plates through the window to Joseph Knight Sr., and he says, "These are the plates." And Joseph hefts them, feels them. Yeah, they're very real. Okay? And then the next day, they will then take those plates, they will dig up the hearth in the fireplace, they will bury the plates in the fireplace, and then they will cover it up and put the fire back on. Okay? About that time, here comes the soothsayer and Chase and Lawrence and everybody, and they break into the house, and the soothsayer comes in with a little divining rod thing and goes, "They're in the hearth." At which point Joseph starts yelling and screaming. The family, they get him scooted out of the house. They move the plates. They put a box now that they have in one part of the cooper shop on the other side of the road, and they will take the plates and they will put them up in the hayloft and cover them with flax and seeds and stuff. Okay. The gang will come the next night. They will tear up the house. They will tear up the cooper shop, but they never find the plates. Now, let me just step back from this a little bit. Part of the attacks against the church is the fact that, well, where are the plates? And we say, where are the plates?
With Angel Moroni.
The angel Moroni took them back. And the response is usually, that's really convenient. Okay? Now, in fact, just a few years later, one of the first writers of anti-Mormon literature, a guy by the name of E.D. Howe, who will write the very first anti-Mormon book, Mormonism Unveiled, which it's amazing to me how often even the blogs and stuff are still quoting from E.D. Howe. Good grief. From 1831. But E.D. Howe will then go back to the same people and say, did Joseph Smith have gold plates? And Chase and Lawrence and everybody else goes, nah, he just made them up. There wasn't any plates. The community knew the plates were. Martin Harris had gone to the site, found where the hole had been dug. There were people that would go back to that area. They would find parts of the stone at the bottom of the hill. The community knew that the plates existed. That there was no question that there were actual plates. So let me ask this. So here's one of those questions that I think you need to rest on. If Joseph Smith was able to translate the Book of Mormon without ever really using the plates, why was there a need for the plates in the first place? Because we got the Book of Moses, we got the Book of Abraham, and those are pure revelations. Why was there a need for the plates in the first place? Couldn't he have done it without the plates?
No.
Why?
He wasn't developed as a prophet enough, as a translator.
Okay.
He had to have them.
But he didn't look at them very much. I mean, he copied off characters. Remember, they're just sitting most of the time covered. Why would he need plates? Yeah.
I think it was because of the witnesses.
Which witnesses?
Well, Oliver Cowdery.
Yeah.
Didn't they all hold the plate?
They did. Joseph Knight. Even Martin Harris's wife got to hold the box with the thing in it.
It was a witness also of Joseph's trial of faith that he actually received them.
So for Joseph, it was kind of a payoff for his trial of faith.
Maybe.
I think so. Why else do you think? The wheels are turning because people are going to ask this. Yeah.
Well, one thing I think would be the fact that his writings came from somewhere.
Right.
If he didn't have the plates originally, they would have thought he made it up in his head.
There were a number of people having visions, religious visions at the time. Everybody had visions. How many had physical plates?
One.
Yeah.
I also feel that he was warned that he could not sell the gold to their prophet. And this was a huge test to him.
Yeah. There was a test for him, wasn't there? And by the way, isn't that fascinating? I was listening to a talk by Richard Bushman, who wrote Rough Stone Rolling, and he found it fascinating that they were gold plates. Now, we don't know if they were complete gold, if they were an alloy, but they were always kind of seen as gold plates. So let's assume for a second that they were. Isn't it fascinating that on one side, the Book of Mormon talks repeatedly about the dangers of gold and following after gold and its gold treasure and all of the wickedness that is a focus on gold. At the same time, when they were building King Solomon's temple, what did they line the temple with? Gold. So you get this mix, right? It's a gold plate. On one side, gold can be used for treasure and to buy stuff. You can have anything in this world, right, with this? But on the other side, you also get gold in terms of kingly and royal and the most valuable thing. Yeah?
It's soft too, and it's easy to write on.
Yeah. Now the fascinating thing, it is easier to write on. But let me just mention one other thing. We still have yet to find in the ancient Middle East, around 600 BC, that we're finding some things inscribed on plates, but we don't have records. It isn't like record keeping. Most of look at the Dead Sea Scrolls. They had a tendency to write them on what? Parchment. Parchment. Animal skins. You just don't have a history of record after record. Now, there were some kingly things where sometimes they would inscribe who a king was, but in terms of keeping annual records of a people in length on metal plates, we don't have that.
Might suggest the history of those places not been over.
Yes. You want to keep going with that? Because?
I believe that the time will come in which those places will be made available.
I think so too. I think that one day we will see those plates.
Also, the hidden portion will be important.
There is that sealed portion, whatever that means, will be available to us. We've been promised that. But also think about as Joseph was looking at those plates, and there they are in front of him, who touched those plates? How were those plates put together? And why didn't they put it on parchment? Why plates? And the brass plates, that's the other one that we have. The only other one that we have is brass plates. And it's going to be for the same reason, Deb, you just said. Why would these plates not be written on parchment? Or what was the reason? For who? For us. Parchment stuff, writing. We're lucky with the Dead Sea Scrolls that they were in such an incredibly pristine, untouched, that they could actually make it through thousands of years. But generally, parchment writing wasn't expected to last more than a few hundred years. These were letters and stuff. Plates, like the brass plates, like the gold plates, were intended for who? Generate us. They were meant, this is our record, and it's not for our grandkids. This is our record, and it's going to be for thousands of years down the road.
I read somewhere, it was not a scripture, it was something that never even made the scriptures, it was just an archaeological surprise. And it said that Adam's children were taught to keep the records both on clay tablets and on metal, because clay would survive fire and metal would survive floods.
Yeah, but we're not finding them.
No.
That's the amazing thing about it.
Some of the Sumerians and stuff you find in clay.
Sure, right. Yeah, with clay tablets, we have those. Okay? Yeah.
The first time I heard about the Prophet Muhammad writing the Quran, it's almost identical to the Joseph Smith story. It's a young man, he's got this vision, he's told the story, and he writes it out. There's no
Right, there's nothing
to corroborate that.
Yeah, in fact, Daniel Peterson and some of the Islam experts at BYU believe that Islam did the same thing as Christianity did in the fact that there was a falling away, an apostasy. If you look at the very original stuff, there was a lot to it that is very similar to Christianity. Okay, but you're right, we don't have them. Okay, so here are these plates then that have come to us down through. Now, let me jump ahead. And this to me is one of the more startling things, that new information that we have this summer that I don't think we really had previous to this. We know that Joseph will now have the plates. They're bothering him so much that he will then move down to Harmony, Pennsylvania, to kind of get out of Dodge so they can get something done. Father-in-law isn't real grateful to have Joseph there, because remember, Joseph is now has a problem with two different groups. Remember, there are the treasure seekers, then there are the highbrow people. The treasure seekers are upset because Joseph has taken a turn for the religious. He's not doing treasure stuff. The highbrow people are upset that this former treasure thing is talking about revelations and scriptures and angels and seeing God. He managed to offend both sides. So they get out of Palmyra. They go down to Harmony. Martin Harris, up in Palmyra, has a vision. We don't know the extent of that vision, but he's being told by the Lord, you need to take a copy of the record to New York and get to some experts. So Martin Harris will then go down to Harmony, and he'll say, I feel like I've had a vision. I'm supposed to take a copy of these things. I'm supposed to take them to New York to show them to experts. Joseph will pray about it. Yeah, you're right, you're supposed to. And he will copy down on parchment or on a piece of paper. There will be the characters, and underneath it is actually a translation. He did a brief translation on these things. Okay? The one, and I'll show you in a second, the copy that we have of this is not the one that went to Charles Anthony. This one has a translation to it. So Martin Harris will take this copy because they're looking for something specifically. Joseph says there was a book deposited, written upon gold plates, giving an account of the former inhabitants of this continent and the source from whence they sprang. Now, so who does he believe the records are of? Yes. If he has records from the Indians, what language do you think he figures the plates are written in? Indian. Indian. So, here's what he does. Hold on. So the first one that Martin Harris, after he has the vision, Martin Harris will go see Luther Bradish. Luther Bradish was a local legislator from Palmyra that is now down in Albany. And Luther Bradish will say to him, I know a couple of guys that are experts in understanding Native American languages. Go to Philadelphia, and there's a guy down there by the name of... go down there, they'll tell you where to go. So he goes down to Philadelphia. The group at Philadelphia sends him to Samuel Mitchell. Samuel Mitchell knows Mohawk language. Samuel Mitchell was involved in some Indian treaties. He believes that there was an ancient people on this continent, a couple of ancient ones. And he is looking at these. So Martin Harris is going to him, and he's going to then also take it to Charles Anthony because they knew native languages or were acquainted with native languages.
At the time, historically, there was an intense interest in the Indians, and so this was very appealing.
Samuel Mitchell was gathering sources for a book on Native American languages.
I can't remember the name. I listened to a BYU lecture.
Yeah, called The Three Wise Men.
It's fascinating.
It is. It's incredible. Now, so imagine Martin Harris's surprise when these guys start taking a look at this, and they're going, we don't think this is Indian. We don't think this is Native American. This looks like it's more Middle Eastern. Really? We thought it was Indian. he had.
One of them did.
Samuel Mitchell was actually the one. Samuel Mitchell actually pulled out some books and started comparing it and saying, well, you know, it doesn't look exactly like Egyptian, but one of the things that we found, for instance, in Egyptian language, there was a formal writing that we see on sarcophaguses and stuff, and then there was like a cursive writing that was much less formal, and it looks more like that. Like the Upper Nile, the language of the kings. Whoa, okay. So after all of this, Martin Harris is going to go back to Joseph Smith and said, apparently it's not Indian. Apparently it is some kind of Egyptian thing. Which tells Joseph two things. One, this is not a Native American plates. Number two, guess who's going to have to do the translation? Joseph had sent Martin Harris specifically, and here's the new information. Joseph had sent Martin Harris to these wise men because he wanted to find somebody who could translate the plates. He would make sure he got them published, but he didn't expect to do the translation himself. I'm just a rough I'm farm boy. I don't know languages. I'm good at looking into these seer stones and finding things and getting little bits of translation, but I'm not the guy to do the translation. I'm hoping you'll find somebody in New York that can do it. So not only is it not Indian, but it's Egyptian, and not only that, nobody else. You know, the Rosetta Stone is yet to be discovered. There's nobody on the continent that could do Reformed Egyptian. So when Martin Harris comes back, he realizes now for the first time he is to be the translator, nobody else. Kind of fascinating. Just gives you a sense of how Joseph saw himself and how little he picked up on it. Does that make sense? Now you go, well, wait a minute. The very first page of the Book of Mormon says that it was Reformed Egyptian, right? The language of my fathers, right? When did Joseph get to that part of the Book of Mormon? We know now that when the 116 pages were lost, that Joseph, in all likelihood, started with Mosiah in his translation process with Oliver, and they will go Mosiah all the way to Moroni, and then they will come back around and start on the small plates and start on 1st Nephi. So it'll probably be somewhere in April or May of 1829 when Joseph will finally go, oh, this is Reformed Egyptian. Okay? All right. We got about 10 minutes. Oh, there's the one that we have believed forever was the Anton characters. We now believe, because this doesn't have a translation underneath it, that this is actually some characters off the plates that Joseph gave to Oliver Cowdery at the end of the translation process, kind of as a souvenir. But that's kind of you see kind of the cursive. This doesn't look like traditional Egyptian with all of the Isis and all that kind of stuff that you see on a sarcophagus. All right. So in the time that we're remaining, I want to kind of finish with this and then next week again we're going to start with the background into the into 600 BC, and then what's going on with Lehi and the political things that are going to go on, and we're going to talk a lot about Josiah and the Deuteronomists and the effect that it has on the Book of Mormon. And for those of you who haven't been around us talking about Josiah and the Deuteronomists, that'll be an interesting addition. Okay. In the church, we used to be pretty quick to say not all of our history is helpful. Not meaning that it isn't like we're hiding parts of church history, but we're just not talking about treasure hunting and seer stones and heads in hats and things like that. Not all of our history is helpful. But now, here's what we're seeing. Our history, warts and all, needs to be told by generations by us. We can't say this just isn't important to your salvation. We need to be able to have the facts, have the information, and be able to share them with, and that means that you have to have your own answers about things. If somebody's going to ask you about Joseph and polygamy, have you got an answer? About blacks in the priesthood, have you got an answer? And you're ready to, or is it all right if you're struggling a bit and you're having some doubts and you're trying to get your own answers to things? Okay? Because we're seeing a very human people and organizations mature. And I think that's faith enhancing. One of the amazing things, as I look at the incredible, and getting ready for this class again and going back and rereading things, and coming to understand the incredible complexity that is the Book of Mormon. On one level, it just seems so simple and straightforward. But when you begin to understand exactly how it was crafted, by the authors it was crafted, the things that they were trying to do with it, the Book of Mormon becomes more and more complex. And then I look at Joseph Smith. This guy that says, if they show up at the Hill Cumorah, I'm going to beat the stumps with them. This is
pretty charming.
It's an absolute miracle. There is no... And so I just start laughing sometimes when I read blogs by supposedly smart people going, well, when Joseph Smith wrote the Book of Mormon, I go, yeah, right. There was absolutely no way this man could produce the Book of Mormon. Not only was there not another person on the planet that could produce the Book of Mormon, but with Joseph, there was no way. In 6 weeks.
Oh, there's that too.
I mean, again, I've written a book in 6 weeks, and it's like this big, and to have the complexity of this is just is amazing to me.
And you had a computer.
And I had a computer. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, say that one again so you guys hear that.
Don't make Joseph Smith a Mormon after the first vision.
Don't make him a Mormon after the translation either. I mean, this guy is just rough, and he's still learning as he goes. Remember, he gets to the end of the Book of Mormon translation, and he turns to David Whitmer and he goes, I think I'm done. I did what I was supposed to do. The Lord wanted me to produce the Book of Mormon. I think I'm done. I'll go back to farming. You know, he's still... Part of what we're about to see is a prophet whose vision slowly unfolded as he matured. He didn't see the whole picture, and the Lord wasn't going to land the whole picture on it. It's almost like we see him walking out of the sacred grove going, I see the whole thing now. He didn't. Prophets see things slowly opening up. So here's Elder Ballard's part of Elder Ballard's comments from yesterday. To Relief Society and Stake Presidents, when someone comes to you with a question or a concern, please do not brush the question off. Do not tell them or her not to worry about the question. Please do not doubt a person's dedication to the Lord's work. Instead, help the person find answers to the question. We're looking forward to Sunday night with the Plano youth, where we're going to have a question and answer session, and they're writing up questions to ask Cindy and myself and President Wilding and his wife, and I got a copy of the questions these kids are asking this morning. Holy cow! Oh yeah, it's time to go on vacation this weekend. My goodness, the questions that they're at. Huh?
Good luck with that one. I'll just give them.
Yeah, oh my gosh. The questions are complex and they're difficult. I think I'm struggling with same-sex attraction. What do I do? What am I supposed to do with magic garments? Are they really that important? You know, they are the things that they're hearing and they're being bombarded with is just, it isn't just like, is French kissing okay? It is like, what do I do with all of these very difficult questions? My friend's saying, because we believe in traditional marriage, are we hate mongers kind of thing? And some of it has to do with our church history. So, Elder Ballard is saying, We have heard stories when someone asking honest questions about our history, doctrine, or practice were treated as though they were faithless. Just read more. Just pray more. You'll get answers. No, you may not. You've got to have somebody walking you through and putting information in front of them so they can get answers. This is not the Lord's way. As Peter said, be ready always to give an answer to every man or woman that asketh you a reason for the hope that's in you. The people that I struggle with, to be honest with you, when I've got people in my office that are struggling with faith, and I have a number of them, it is interesting how many of them have never had to confront questions about this, have never grew up in the church believing that we kind of had immediately all the answers. Mormonism just answers all this stuff. Haven't had to really struggle on this, and in so many cases haven't had I'm going to study this, I'm going to go back and get an answer to prayer, and then know that I got an answer to prayer. They just kind of grew up in it and accepted it. Well, this generation ain't doing that quite so much. They're asking. They can Google pretty fast. They don't have a Urim and Thummim as their Google.
Google and Thummim.
Yeah, the Google and Thummim. Yeah.
So last night we saw this documentary on Netflix called American Mormons, and it talked about the man that's doing it is the guy from Singles War, the one that was always on Steve Cuddy.
Yeah, yeah.
So he's like, I'm from Salt Lake. We all know about what Mormons do. So let's get out in the world and ask people. And they were on the streets asking them, like, what do they do? And it's like today, they wear bonnets or they don't wear makeup. And why do they believe in this? Have you heard of the Book of Mormon? They ask all these questions. And I was teaching Sunday school to the youth, and we're like, they probably don't get bombarded about polygamy anymore, because that's probably more our generation. And in the documentary, they were still like, they believe in many wives and saving souls and having children, And so I'm like, oh my goodness, they are getting bombarded by these still today, even though through our church history. And it was just really interesting to watch who he was interviewing and all.
They don't get it, do they?
And it was just really neat to watch.
Yeah, and we had with Mitt Romney kind of a Mormon moment, I think, where there was a lot of interest. With same-sex marriage and all that, there's another Mormon moment coming, and it's not going to be quite as fun. Because we are, now, again, back to Education Week and Elder Anderson giving the address at Education Week last month, where he stood and said, the world is more polarized than it's ever been, and we're going to look more and more increasingly out of step. But he said, and he promised us, he said, the Lord will give us a compensatory blessing, a compensatory spirit to offset everything that we're going to be being hit with. That more insight, more knowledge, more understanding. If we can do that, I think we can answer the questions of our history, which to me are so faith-promoting. To see Joseph Smith in like this is to say the Book of Mormon is such a miracle. And what he became, the man that walked into Carthage was not the kid that walked out of the grove. And then also the complexity as we start taking a hard look at the Book of Mormon to understand how beautifully and deliberately this book was put together should be faith-producing as well. So, finally with Elder Ballard, we need to do better at responding to honest questions. We need to do better at responding to honest questions. Although we may not be able to answer every question about the cosmos or our history, our practices, or doctrine, we can provide many answers to those who are sincere. Help those with questions to realize that the Lord does not require His saints to have advanced degrees in history or church doctrine. Therefore, we should not expect parents, leaders, and teachers to have all the answers to every question. Can they be all right with some dissonance, with some doubt, where we're not necessarily clearing it up? Even among the First Presidency and Quorum of the 12 Apostles, there are those that have very different backgrounds and training that allow for the sharing of a wide range of experience to our discussions and deliberations. So that's what I'd finish with today. As we begin this kind of in-depth look at the Book of Mormon, recognize that we're not going to have all answers. But doubt has always been part of our doctrine, in a sense, for Adam and Eve to be placed in the garden and then say, do we eat the fruit or do we follow God? Do we do what He says or do we eat the fruit? That we have these difficult decisions that have to be made. To Abraham walking up Mount Moriah and going, do I preserve for my generations my son, or do I sacrifice him the way that the Lord says? I have difficult decisions that I need answers to. And I may not have a perfect answer to that. I think the Book of Mormon is going to give us some clarity on how to respond to these. And I leave that with you in Jesus' name. Amen.